May I call the meeting to order? Please take your seats. So, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to open the second CSP8 informal preparatory meeting. This meeting forms part of the preparation process for the 8th Conference of State Parties, scheduled to take place of the period 22nd to 26th of August 2022. At the very outset, I would like to welcome all representatives of states parties, signatory states, other states, civil society, and industry to this meeting. I appreciate the effort you have all made to participate in the meeting this week. I would like to extend special words of welcome to the Philippines, which ratified the ATT on 24th of March 2022, becoming thus the 111th state party to the ATT. We look forward to collaboratively working with the Philippines. I would also like to take this opportunity to express my sincere appreciation to the vice presidents, the management committee, the chairs and facilitators of the working groups, the chair of the Voluntary Trust Fund Selection Committee, the chair of the Diversion Information Exchange Forum, and the ATT Secretariat for working together in making this meeting possible. Distinguished delegates, you may recall that the 7th Conference of State Parties, CSP7, established an informal preparatory process for CSP8 as a platform for an all-inclusive consultation. To streamline this process, the President and the ATT office holders decided on a schedule of ATT meetings for the period leading up to CSP8. This schedule was formally issued in November 2021 and circulated to the ATT community by the ATT Secretariat. In terms of this schedule, we announced 2 series of ATT preparatory meetings. The first series of meetings took place in February. The working group meetings that have taken place since Tuesday this week and this very meeting constitute the second series of the CSP8 preparatory meetings. Due to constraints still being presented by the gradually fading pandemic, we felt that it would be the best for the second series of CSP8 preparatory meetings to be conducted in person, with an option for those who cannot attend in person to participate remotely via the Zoom platform. However, the format chosen for these meetings implies reduced time for our work. Therefore, I would like to thank all of you for your understanding and support throughout the period of uncertainty. As you may be aware, the purpose of the preparatory meetings is to create a transparent platform to consult with all states parties and other stakeholders in the run-up to the CSP8. We firmly believe that an effective consultation process on CSP8 preparations will help bring about some degree of predictability on the expected outcome of the forthcoming conference. Distinguished delegates, all documents for this week were circulated by the ATT Secretariat to all ATT stakeholders and published on the ATT website in all treaty languages, that's Arabic, Chinese, English, French, Russian, and Spanish. To further improve the level of participation in these meetings, it gives me pleasure to note that the working group meetings that took place this week have enjoyed in-session interpretation. A similar arrangement has been made for this meeting. Distinguished delegates, let me now turn my attention to the draft agenda for today, which was circulated as part of the documentation for this meeting. After this opening, we will turn to agenda item 2, Under this item, I will update the meeting about the informal consultations that have been conducted thus far regarding the priority theme for the German presidency on post-shipment controls. During agenda item 3, the ATT Secretariat will update the meeting about the status of finances. Under agenda item 4, we will receive reports from the ATT working groups in terms of how they are progressing with their work and how they foresee their reports for the CSP8. During agenda item 5, the ATT Secretariat will update the meeting on the status of the ATT project funded by the European Union to support ATT implementation. And under agenda item 6, we will focus on the proposed draft agenda for CSP8. After exhausting the agenda, the meeting will conclude. Distinguished delegates, would any delegation like to take the floor on the proposed agenda at this stage, or may I take it that the draft agenda for this meeting is agreed as presented? This seems to be the case, so it's so decided. Distinguished delegates, I would now turn my attention to item 2 of our agenda, under which, as I said, I update on informal consultations, priority theme for the German presidency. So, following consideration of the status of the treaty, including areas of progress and areas of challenge, Germany has chosen post-shipment controls as priority theme during its terms of office. You will recall the first workshop on post-shipment controls we had in February with ATT states parties. It provided valuable inputs for our work and already allowed for initial exchanges with and between interested states parties. On Tuesday this week, we had the second workshop that also saw participation of UNIDIR and CIPRI, representing the civil society, and Dynamit Noble Defense Germany, representing the industry as an active actor in post-shipment controls, as well as the German Export Control Agency, BAFA. Furthermore, representatives from Switzerland and from Canada took part in the workshop. We discussed different solutions regarding the introduction of post-shipment controls, focusing on on-site visits. Operational challenges, economic aspects of post-shipment controls, and the perspective of the industry were addressed. I was impressed with the broad participation of nearly 100 participants, among them representatives from Japan, the USA, China, Korea, several African and European states, and civil society organizations. The participants of the workshop managed to address a multitude of important issues regarding post-shipment controls, such as the clear connection of post-shipment controls to Articles 7 and 11 of the ATT. Also, post-shipment controls are not explicitly mentioned there. The aspect of trust and trust building of post-shipment controls, which, if carried out properly, can contribute to confirming importers and exporters' international reputation as actors which fulfill obligations of handling and storing weapons. The advisable share of deliveries subject to PSCs in relation to overall exports. And different kinds of labeling by manufacturers of arms which might facilitate PSCs as well as exacerbate diversion and contribute to effective stockpiling of weapons. It looks like we have opened up a discussion with these two workshops that will certainly need further deliberations to map out ways on how to make best use of this instrument. Another important aspect is networking. Only if delegations know who is working on the issue in the different branches or offices of the various countries, they can start to cooperate, and I guess we achieved something also in this respect. The results of both workshops will form now the basis for a paper summarizing the discussions and providing a toolbox for the implementation of PSCs, which Germany will present ahead of the CSP8 to allow for the thematic debate during this conference. And with this, I would like to open the floor for delegations' views on the update just provided. Is there any delegation who wants to take the floor? This does not seem to be the case. So then, thank you very much for the support in this priority theme of our presidency, and you're interested in it, and we will follow up as indicated. So I would now proceed then to item 3 of our agenda. At this stage, I would like to invite the head of the ATT Secretariat to update the meeting about the status of ATT finances. But before we start, please allow me a short remark. You will hear well-known numbers and numbers that are publicly available on the ATT website. From these numbers arises a clear task. We have to join our efforts to increase the financial stability of our treaty. In my capacity as a president of the CSP8, I have sent out letters asking for the settlement of financial issues. We offer help with the financial mechanisms introduced last year, but ultimately it rests with us to support the financial base for the future operation of our treaty through a timely and full payment. Commitment to the treaty can be shown by the engagement of state parties in our common work, like we have seen this week, but it has to be shown by a timely payment of assessed contributions. And with this I would like to give the floor to the head of the Secretariat. So please, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. As indicated by the President, I would just provide an overview or an update to this meeting regarding the status of finances of the ATT. We do these presentations at every ATT meeting with a view to trying to encourage delegates and states parties and other states to honor their financial obligations as issued to them at the relevant times. And as a way of background, but without spending too much time on this, because I think we are now familiar with that, it's just to reinforce the message that the ATT financial rules are the basis that sets the formula for the calculation of ATT assessed contributions. And the considerations that are taken into account in that process would of course be including the budget approved by the conference, look at the number of states parties and states that were at attendance at the last ATT meeting or conference. And we also apply the UN scale of assessment in arriving at an assessed contribution for each state. And also, which is very important, is a scale of effort that the ATT would want to adopt at any given point in time. And what we mean by that is basically the program of work. The program of work for the following cycle will determine the resources that would need to support that particular plan. So these are matters that are taken into account in arriving at a calculation and at a assessed contribution notice that you get in October of every year. And again, we underscore the point that the ATT is not funded from any other source other than from financial contributions made by states. There is no any other financial contribution that we received. It is exclusively funded by contributions. And state parties, of course, they contribute towards conference services as well as the cost of the secretariat. But other states who are not necessarily states parties, those who are signatory states and observers, do make a contribution, but their contribution is limited to conference costs as well as the cost of the secretariat for the organization of that particular conference. The process established for this, and again, it's very important for us to be able to remind delegates of this, that the process, the financial management process of the ATT would always be guided by certain milestones, and one of it is, starting point is the approval of a budget by a conference of states parties. And after that, in the October of the very same year, we issue the invoices for contribution. And those are payable within 3 months of issue. And after that, the president then sends out reminders to states. And the president has already indicated that we had already sent out reminders to states for contributions. And we post this information on the ATT website. There's a dedicated part where you can find all information regarding contributions by states. And of course, also the rollover register, which reflects the profile of states of payment from the beginning of time up to this point. Where we stand at the present moment is the slide on the board tries to summarize the status of contribution at this point in time. We have had 7 years of contributions or of assessments, starting from 2015-16 right up to 2022. That's about seven years in full. The first line over there, it indicates the budget that was approved by conference or by CSP, and it is on the basis of that budget that we make assessed contributions. The second line in green indicates the contribution or the contributions that have been received since those assessed contributions or invoices for assessment were issued. You will therefore realize that if we focus on the last year, which is 2022, just for the interest of this meeting, that at this point we have received 87% of the assessed contributions. So we still have about 13% to go. That is still outstanding, but at this point we have received 87%. And for the other years, I think it has become a norm that we have never gone beyond 94% of contributions. So, but for the current year, which is 2022, we have received 87%. But then there are contributions that are outstanding, and they're indicated in red. And you'll see that for the current year, which is 2022, we are still owed by states that we assessed an amount of 149,282. So that is still outstanding, and we require, or that amount of money is we are expecting it to be paid by the states that are involved in that. But interestingly, if you look at the line after that, it's actually the number of states that have paid in terms of percentage, basically meaning 54% of the states have paid, and those states have taken about 87% of the contribution. But we are still then, there's a 46% of states that have not yet paid. The last or the orange line is indicative of the in-kind contribution that is made by the government of Switzerland to support the ATT Secretariat, and we continue to be grateful to the government of Switzerland for making this contribution, because if it was not made by Switzerland, so this amount of money would be expected to be paid by states. But at this point in time, it is taken care of by the Swiss government as an in-kind contribution to support this process. Can I ask my colleagues to move to the next slide? I'm unable to do it from here. Thank you. The next slide is about outstanding contributions, and this is just trying to make this point even much more clearer, that the 149 states indicated in red in respect of 2022, there are 58 states that are required to pay that amount of money. So 58 states are still in the red insofar as that is concerned, and 28 for the year before that, 2021. And at the bottom is an indication of how many states are still having some outstanding contribution. But the worrying factor here is about the outstanding contribution as a total. Because at this point in time, if we add up all these red numbers, they give us over $500,000 US. That is outstanding. And over time, there will be a problem of, if you look at assets and liabilities and all of it, if you look at it from that perspective, this organization may find itself in very uncomfortable zones very, very soon. Next slide. The next slide is just an indication of the trend, the state of, or the rate at which states make their contributions. So payments for this year are not anything different from the previous year in terms of the time at which they are paid. But what is clear, the message to take away from this slide, is that most of the contributions are received between November as well as April of the following year. Beyond that, then the line starts to even out. So November to April are very crucial times. Crucial because financial years of different states are at different times. Others have got a financial year starting in January to December, and others have got a different patterns of financial years. But generally, the time at which we receive most of the contribution is between November as well as April. If we can move to the next slide. The next slide is an indication of the cash flow. The cash flow for current purposes is where we have taken the cash in hand, meaning the money that has been collected is in the bank, and we have tried to project that over planned activities for the year. We have a program of work, and if you take the money that we have and you try to calculate that against that, you'll see that the money that we have currently collected or received will take us up to the end of November 2022. So December is not covered. Well, what is positive, maybe I should say that, is that the Conference of States Parties, we have got sufficient resources to support the Conference of States Parties in August, much as we have collected sufficient money to cover this meeting as well as the one in February. So it means meetings for this year would be covered. But of course, then December would not be covered. Yes, there is no meeting taking place in December, but there is staff cost that is relevant during that time. So the current resources or money collected can only take us to the end of November. And we are hopeful that there will be further contributions made that would ensure that we are able to go through the entire financial year. The implications of non-payment are indicated over here. We have indicated previously, and CSP8 reaffirmed the application of the financial rule 8.4 in terms of rollover of uncommitted balance of appropriations. And at that time, there was a decision made to the effect that for the first 3 years, meaning 2015, 16, 17, and 18, that principle was not fully applied, and there is a need, therefore, to have the rollover effected for paid-up states in respect of those particular years. And a period of 5 years was set out for that. And we have, over the past 3 years, then paid back the money to states who are paid up. And at this point, we are left with 2 years to go out of the 5 years. And I must say then that 68% of the owed contributions that we owe to states has been paid back to states. Those are states that the Secretariat was supposed to pay, but we still have 32% to go, and we're going to cover that in the next 2 years, which is 2023 and 2024. And by that time, then all debts that we owe to states will be settled. But we hope, therefore, at that time, that the debts that are owed by states to this organization would also be addressed. Because if it's not, then we get into trouble. We are accumulating a 7% deficit on a yearly basis. And if we are accumulating that, it basically means that the budget of the following year is reduced by 7%. And over time, it basically means whatever budget that you receive will therefore have to carry the deficit that you have accumulated over time. And that is not sustainable. And I said in the previous meeting, and I say it again here, that this organization, if the pattern of payment does not change, is likely to get into financial difficulties in the medium term because of the accumulation of deficit that we are experiencing. CSP5 in 2019 decided to establish a reserve fund where states were going to make or were encouraged to make voluntary contributions. Up to date, we are just indicating here that there is no contribution that has been received thus far into the reserve fund. So the fund or that account remains in place, but it is not accumulating any contribution from any state thus far. And the last slide that I would want to talk to is about the guidelines for making financial arrangements. You recall that last year in CSP7 adopted guidelines for making financial arrangements under Rule 81D. Under this rule, a state that is in arrears for 2 or more years has a possibility to come forward and request to make a financial arrangement with the Secretariat. There is a process that is set out to deal with the requests that are submitted by states. But I regret to inform this meeting that up to this point, we have not yet received any application or request by any state requesting to make a financial arrangement. I must say we have received 2 inquiries at the point in time, and those are inquiries, informal inquiries, but we have not received any formal submission for a financial arrangement to be made. And I recall that at the time when this was discussed, it was seen as an opportunity for states to make good of their financial affairs. And unfortunately, this possibility is not taken advantage of. And so, Mr. President, this is, in a nutshell, the status of finances at this point in time. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, and I thank the Secretariat for this this sober analysis of where we stand. I've seen this already in our February meeting, and perhaps just before I open the floor to give delegations the possibility to express their views on this situation, let me just underline that I think this is a challenge for all of us. It's not just a challenge for the presidency. It's not a challenge for the Secretariat. It's really to all of us to find a solution and a way forward on this financial issues. So with this, I would like to open the floor, and yes, who wants to intervene? Okay, this is
Mexico.
Okay. So first speaker, my list is then Mexico, please. Mexico, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, presidente.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the Secretariat for the information that they have provided right now. And we also want to thank them because we know that every day they're making great efforts to cover such an important question as finances, the finances of the convention. Two brief observations, if you allow. There are questions that have worried us in the last 2 years, and we hope that now that we can meet in person, it would be easier to restart the dialogue on the implementation of the financial rules and to obtain some certainty on the contributions, because part of the commitments of state party is indeed to pay their contributions. We are very much surprised, negatively surprised by the fact that no contributions have been received by any member for the reserve fund. We hope that some delegations will show more sensitivity. And we are also worried by the fact that no delegations have asked for any financial arrangements, especially those who have missions in Geneva could very easily consult the Secretariat. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished delegate from Mexico for its intervention. And next on my list is UK. Please, Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. President, and thank you from my delegation too to the Secretariat for that, not only for their work every day to manage in what are clearly very difficult financial circumstances, but also indeed for the very clear way in which the situation was spelt out for us. We have discussed this issue many times over the last few years. The situation keeps on getting worse. We spoke about this in February, and we had a similar presentation in February, and nothing much seems to have changed since February, which is very disappointing. We, of course, must insist that it is a legal obligation for all states parties to pay their assessed contributions on time and in full. We've said it many times, many ways, but there is no getting away from this fact that this treaty will only survive if all states parties pay all of their assessed contributions on time and in full. And again, I insist that it is an obligation under the treaty to do that. Now, notwithstanding this, we have worked hard collectively over the last few years, not only to find ways of easing the structural problems, the liquidity problems, the cash flow problems that the various accounting rules impose on us, but also, as the distinguished delegate of Mexico just said, to find ways of trying to find ways of helping states meet their obligations. It was at the insistence of many states that we spent the last 2 years coming up with this arrangement to help states more than 2 years in arrears find ways of repaying those arrears. I'm incredibly disappointed that this offer has not been taken up, despite that hard work that has been done by many people over the last 2 years to put these arrangements into place. And as our Secretary has said, very diplomatically, I must say, that we will be in very uncomfortable zones very soon. I think this was the word that was used. In February, I used the word bankrupt, and I will use that word again. We will be bankrupt as a treaty very soon if we do not solve this problem. And as I say, the problem can only be solved by states paying their assessed contributions on time and in full. Now, if we are not going to collectively pay our contributions on time and in full, and if we are not going to use the tools that have been provided to help meet those obligations, then we as a treaty are going to be faced very soon with the prospect of having to take some very difficult decisions about cutting our costs about curtailing our activity. Now, of course, that won't help if people won't pay their bills, but at least it will stop the arrears getting bigger and bigger. Because if we can reduce our budget, then at least, and our expenditure, then at least the arrears will be less in cash terms if they maintain that 7% trend. So at some point, and I suspect that point will come rather sooner than any of us realize, we're going to have to make some very difficult decisions about cutting the activities of the treaty to stop this treaty going bankrupt. I don't have any proposals here today to make, but I think at CSP8 we're going to have that conversation very seriously. And I regret that because this treaty is a fantastically important treaty, and the activities we undertake under this treaty are very valuable, indeed vital. That's why we're all here. But unless states parties start paying their bills on time and in full, we're going to have to take those decisions rather sooner than we would like. So I will end, Mr. President, just by reiterating that call. Please, please, for the sake of this treaty, all states pay your contributions on time and in full. Thank you.
I thank the ambassador for his intervention. And the next speaker on my list is the European Union. European Union, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to start by thanking the head of ATT Secretariat for his presentation, and I would like to echo the interventions just made by Mexico and the United Kingdom. The EU also would like to express its deep concern over the increasingly critical financial situation of the Arms Trade Treaty. This situation, caused by the continued accumulation of non-payment by up to 1/3 of states, could have serious consequences for institutional stability of the treaty. We once again urge all states which have not yet done so to pay their dues in full and on time and to settle their outstanding arrears without further delay. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished delegate from the European Union for this statement, and this concludes my list of speakers. Is there any delegation in the room who would like to take the floor now? This does not seem to be the case. So let me once again like to thank the ATT Secretariat for this update, and let me also just highlight again the importance of timely financial contributions by state parties to the business of the ATT. The ATT operation, meetings like this week, but also the work of the Secretariat rely exclusively on the assessed financial contributions, and so any delay will really have a very negative impact and will impede the realization of the ATT objectives we are all here, we all strive for. So I call really on all states to show their commitment to the treaty and honor their financial obligations they have. I think we will certainly have to follow on this. It's a serious problem, and one of the biggest deception, so to speak, is, and it was also addressed, is that as the ATT Secretariat just reported, that there are no formal requests to make use of the financial arrangements we put in place. I think that's something which would be really the first step to take if there are difficulties with the contributions to make full use of this instrument. So I also would like to call on all states concerned to address the Secretariat to make full use of this instrument, which was set in place especially to solve this problem. So with this, then I would turn to item 4 of our agenda, and So under item 4, we will hear the reports of the ATT subsidiary bodies. The ATT working groups convened in the past days, and they will now give us their work progress reports. I will start with a working group on effective treaty implementation, followed by the working group on transparency and reporting, and conclude with the working group on treaty universalization. At this stage, I invite the chair of the working group of effective treaty implementation, Ambassador Lim, of the Republic of Korea, to give us the report of the working group, including its 3 sub-working groups. So please, Ambassador.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, and ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by expressing my sincere thanks to the 3 facilitators on Article 6 and 7, Article 9, and Article 11. Once again, as we know, they conducted their sessions in unusual circumstances. I commend their efforts to complete their works within the time available. I would also like to express my thanks to you, the participants, for your active and engaging participation in the meetings of the working group on effective treaty implementation. I'm going to give you a very brief recap of the main point arising out of the facilitators' various discussions. And then I'm going to talk about next steps in the process. In the meeting of the sub-working group on Article 6 and 7, facilitated by the Ambassador Sanchez of Spain, facilitators circulated revised the list of possible draft elements for Chapter 1 of the proposed voluntary guide to assist state parties in implementing Article 6 and 7. It was based on the contributions they received from state parties to the methodology template exercise undertaken during the last cycle and the views exchanged during the discussions held so far during the meetings of the UGETI sub-working group on Article 6 and 7. The facilitator emphasized that the aim of the exercise is not to invent new definitions, but to ensure definitions agreed under international law are incorporated in the voluntary guide. And several participants echoed the desirability of referencing existing definitions under international law in the voluntary guide. It was also pointed out that not all state parties are parties to the agreements where relevant definitions can be found, and we need to be mindful of this when crafting appropriate language in the voluntary guide. During the open discussions that followed, delegations provided further comments and suggestions on the draft text. I encourage delegations to submit their detailed comments on the draft text in writing to the facilitator, as some of them were quite lengthy and technical. Some delegations also gave suggestions on the tone and nature of the voluntary guide, with one delegation, for example, suggesting it be designed to give practical guidance and suggestions to states and could include case studies and examples of concrete measures states have taken to implement Article 6 and 7. The facilitator then continued the discussion on Article 6 obligations as contemplated in the multi-year plan. Participants discussed their national implementation of Article 6, including their approaches to interpreting the term knowledge under Article 6.3, whether it encompasses actual and constructive knowledge, what level of knowledge is contemplated, and the extent to which there is a common view on this. Dr. Maya Brem of the International Committee of the Red Cross provided a comprehensive presentation on how the term knowledge and related items are interpreted in international law. Her overview of the options for the standard of knowledge that could be applied helped frame and summarize the discussions that took place on this topic. In the meeting of the sub-working group on Article 9, facilitated by Mr. Rob Wensley of South Africa, the sub-working group on Article 9 focused on two topics: measures to regulate the transit and transshipment of arms by sea, and the role of the private sector in the transit and transshipment of arms. The aim of these discussions was to explore options and common practice for regulating the transit and transshipment of arms by sea, and to hear from industry on their experiences. The facilitator began by summarizing the work of the sub-working group so far and the progress made in the previous sessions. Dr. Julia Honig, assistant professor at the Erasmus University of Rotterdam, gave a kickoff presentation on transport and transit of arms by sea. The presentation was delivered with a view to helping delegations understand the existing international and regional laws and regulations relevant to this topic. The facilitator steered the discussions using as a guide the questions he prepared for the meeting. The questions were designed to elicit information on national approaches to monitoring and controlling the transport of arms by sea. Participants gave examples of their national legislation and regulations that specifically apply to the transit and transshipment of arms by sea, including prior authorization requirements, compliance and regulatory measures applied to private sectors engaged in the transport of arms, training on the identification of dangerous goods for custom personnel, cooperation with maritime operators, and the complexities of information sharing among relevant parties when there are multiple subcontractors involved. For the second topic, the role of the private sector in the transit and transshipment of arms, Mr. Rick Patterson of the Firearm and Ammunition Import-Export Roundtable Trade Group gave a presentation on the perspective of the private sector in the transit and transshipment of arms. There was some discussions regarding the fact that unpredictability of transport route due to weather or other events can lead to deviation of cargo that could be construed as a diversion under the ATT. How do we deal with this anomaly? The importance of ensuring that industry and private actors know what regulations are in place to ensure compliance was emphasized. And the role of regulators in ensuring industry awareness to help overcome these challenges was also pointed out. The facilitator emphasized that the advancing work on the consideration of Article 9 is almost solely dependent on written contributions of delegations. He added that the absence of such inputs therefore impede progress on compiling possible substantive elements for inclusion in any future voluntary guide on the implementation of Article 9. In the meeting of the sub-working group on Article 11, facilitated by Ms. Stella Petrovic of Serbia, the facilitator covered the third stage in the transfer chain after importation or post-delivery. She held discussions on three topics: the role of importing state in preventing diversion, post-delivery cooperation, and the role of private sector and civil society in mitigating diversion risk post-delivery. In the context of the role of importing state in preventing diversion, participants discussed their national control measures, including their import licensing practice and the use of international import certificates and end-user documentation. the use of designated custom offices to deal with arms imports, the warehousing of newly imported military items, and broader stockpile management considerations. The practice of escorting imported arms being transferred upon arrival, requirements for regular reporting on permanently imported weapons. Participants discussed the role of cooperation between exporting and importing states and gave examples of state practice with respect to post-delivery inspections. They discussed some of the benefits and challenges of post-shipment controls, including the resources required to conduct effective post-shipment controls and national security considerations or sensitivities. This seems to be an area where further exploration and exchange of ideas and experiences is warranted, as it seems only a few states are doing this in practice, while others are exploring possibilities. Regarding the role of private sector and civil society in mitigating diversion risk, it was noted that arms manufacturing industry, freight forwarders, financial institutions, and insurance companies have a role to play in providing government with information on suspicious actors and activities of concern. Civil society has a role to play in building the capacity of states to implement their arms control obligations, as well as monitoring and reporting on diversion of weapons and carrying out research on all aspects of diversion. Regarding next steps, we will, in collaboration with the facilitators, consider all of the suggestions and the broader discussions arising from the sub-working groups. Our plan is then to the following. In the context of the sub-working group on Article 6 and 7, the facilitator will take into consideration the comments and suggestions on the list of possible draft elements for Chapter 1 of the proposed voluntary guide, and will prepare a revised draft of the chapter. Delegations are invited to submit the further comment in writing. With respect to the sub-working group on Article 9, the facilitator will begin preparations for a broader look at the relationship between Article 9 and other articles, which will be the focus of the next meeting of the sub-working group in CSP8 cycle. In the context of sub-working group on Article 11, the group has reached the end of the multi-year work plan that was agreed by state parties, and consideration need to be given to the next step for this sub-working group. As the chair of the UGT, I would like to suggest extending the work of the sub-working group on diversion for 1 additional year to continue work on post-delivery cooperation, since, as I mentioned, this seems to be an area of particular interest where further discussions and considerations would be welcome. With that, I thank you all once again for your contributions and suggestions to our discussions, and I look forward to seeing all of you in August. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ambassador Lim, and thank you for the support on the working group on effective treaty implementation. So with this, I would like to open the floor for delegations' views of this report and the work of this group. So please, the floor is open. So this seems okay. We just checked if there's nobody online, but that seems not to be the case, that there is any delegation requesting for the floor. So with that, I would like to thank you for this report and the work of the group on effective treaty implementation. We would then invite now the co-chairs of the working group on transparency and reporting, Ms. Sabine Visser of the Netherlands and Ms. Gerizel Rodriguez of Panama, to give us their report. So please, I invite you to the podium.
Thank you, Mr. President. The co-chairs of the Working Group on Transparency and Reporting would like to commend you, Mr. President, and the ATT Secretariat for the series of successful hybrid meetings that have helped us progress our work in spite of the COVID pandemic. We also congratulate all participants for the high level of participation, discussion, and engagement. We are pleased to report on the status of discussions during the Working Group on Transparency and Reporting. On April 28th, the Working Group held its second meeting as part of the preparatory process to the 8th Conference of States Parties. As the first point on the agenda, the Working Group reviewed the status of reporting through a presentation by the ATT Secretariat. The presentation demonstrated that despite the continued declining trend in annual reporting, there was also some good news. Multiple states parties have submitted reports after they are due to bring their reporting into compliance with Article 13 of the ATT. This is excellent news, and we call on other state parties to follow this example. The continued decline of the reporting remains a serious cause of concern, as is the growing trend of making reports available only to states parties. 5 out of 6 reports submitted over 2021 are made available to states parties only. This continues to pose challenges to the treaty's objective of transparency. Further to the presentations of the ATT Secretariat, representatives from the Stimson Center and the ATT Monitor also presented their findings on reporting trends, focusing both on the need to increase the reporting rate as well as increasing the quality of reporting. In response to the presentation, a number of participants reaffirmed the importance of transparency and reporting as key elements for confidence building among states parties and acknowledged the need to ensure the quality of the reporting. One state party informed that it submitted an updated initial report in February this year, and it's in the process of the preparation of the annual report to be submitted in the due course by the established deadline. One delegation also stressed the importance of transparency to discover instances of diversion and thereby counter it. Other elements that were stressed were the need to introduce tracing and include ammunition in reports. The question regarding the verification and system put in place to ensure the veracity of reports was raised. Some participants made a call for the timely submission of reports, and one delegation reiterated the importance of making reports public beyond states parties. In addition, participants encouraged states parties to use the online reporting tool and to use the revised reporting templates. One delegation proposed to convene a workshop on how to fill in reports and to establish a group of friends to the chairs to promote the fulfillment of reporting obligations. This call was supported by a number of delegations. One delegation called for the practical mechanism to submit ATT reports to UNROCA for those delegations that indicate on their template that they wish to do so. One delegation gave an explanation of their national reporting practices and related the choices made in preparing the report to the fact that different entities are competent for licensing decisions, and for example, decisions on desegregation requires consent from all different responsible entities. The co-chairs reminded states parties that the deadline for submitting the annual report is the 31st of May and encouraged states party to use the revised reporting templates endorsed at CSP8. The co-chairs also encouraged states parties to hand in reports that were due in previous years and had not been submitted. Finally, the co-chairs called on states parties to check the ATT website to check whether the reports posted on the websites are in accordance with their preferences. Regarding the second item on the agenda, challenges concerning reporting, the co-chairs invited participants to share any challenges they are facing in submitting timely and accurate initial and annual reports. The co-chairs also encouraged participants to propose and discuss other means to support states parties in addressing their reporting challenges while continuing to implement existing measures. State parties, civil society, and regional organizations were further invited to brief the working group on initiatives focused on enhancing compliance with the reporting duties. The co-chairs encouraged beneficiaries of the Voluntary Trust Fund and other assistance mechanisms to keep reporting on their experiences and progress. On the FAQ type guidance document, the co-chairs invited delegates to comment on the revised version, which was distributed prior to the meeting as the first annex of the annotated agenda. One delegation proposed a number of additional changes to the FAQ type document and informed it will send them in writing, which the co-chairs will take into account when preparing the next version to be considered by CSP8. One delegation expressed its support for the project on national points of contact as conducted by the ATT Secretariat and financed by the European Union. Under the agenda item substantive reporting and transparency issues, the co-chairs invited Paul Holtum, the head of Conventional Arms and Ammunition Program of UNIDIR, to provide a presentation on the aggregation of data in annual reports. The presentation was a follow-up to the presentation done by UNIDIR during the session in April 2021. Several delegations took the floor to explain their reporting practices and explain the choices made in the national reports regarding the aggregation of data, such as consideration regarding confidentiality or national security. One delegation pointed to additional information that was offered in its national report on a voluntary basis. One delegation expressed its interest in further work on sharing data on GBV and the gendered impact of arms exports, as well as its openness to refine the reporting structure to include a category on this topic. One delegation highlighted its work on bolstering stockpile security management. Another delegation encouraged the working group to explore ways in which states parties that stand out by the quality of their reporting to share good practices with others. One delegation asked for a special session focused on furthering better understanding of the FAQ style document and the way reports are drafted. Co-chairs pointed to the FAQ style document, which contained a number of Q&As regarding aggregation, and reminded participants that there is an open invitation to participants in the working group to raise any substantive issues on reporting and transparency to be discussed in the working group. On the agenda item on organizational means for information exchange, participants were invited to propose and discuss structured mechanisms, processes, and formats facilitating the information exchanges that are required and or encouraged by the treaty, both on the policy level as well as the operational level. Secondly, the co-chairs encouraged states parties and signatory states to register online for access to the restricted area of the ATT website and for access to the IT platform. Co-chairs recalled that exchanges via the information exchange portal are one of the predefined tiers of the three-tier approach for sharing information on diversion that was endorsed by the states parties at CSP4. Finally, the chair of the Diversion Information Exchange Forum provided an update on the organization of the first meeting of the forum as part of the three-tier approach to sharing information on diversion. The chair of the DIF encouraged all states parties and stakeholders to contribute concrete cases to contribute to the maiden meeting of the DIF, which is expected to take place during CSP8. Under the agenda item on reporting and transparency functionalities of the IT platform, states parties were given the opportunity to flag any problems or inconveniences that they experience with the information exchange platform or using the online reporting tool, and to provide suggestions and comments to improve its functionality. The co-chairs noted that the use of the IT platform remains highly modest and encouraged states parties to take advantage of these tools that are at their disposal. One delegation called for the list of national points of contact to be made available on the public website of the ATT rather than the current practice adopted at CSP3 to make the list available on the restricted website only. And then the final agenda item, the co-chairs introduced their proposed draft mandate for the working group for the CSP9 cycle, which was contained in Annex B of the draft annotated agenda. The co-chairs explained that the draft mandate contains considerably fewer recurrent and specific tasks that the working party is tasked to deal with as a minimum during the upcoming CSP cycle compared to the mandate of the CSP8 cycle, and explained that the underlying idea was to allow the work in the working group to be more flexible and responsive to upcoming challenges and developments, and to input from members of the working group. The co-chairs called on the members of the working group to share their views and thoughts on the proposed mandates. A new version of the mandate will be put forward for adoption at CSP8 in accordance with the terms of reference and Rule 42.2 of the ATT Rules of Procedure. Including, we would like to thank all participants for their engagement in the discussion of the meeting. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you for this report. I now open the floor for delegations to use on the report of the working group on transparency and reporting. So please, the floor is open. So that doesn't seem to be the case. So then I would like to thank again the co-chairs of the working group for this report and their work and their commitment. Thank you very much. And with this, so with this, allow me to look back to the exchanges we had yesterday in the working group on treaty universalization. I think we had a very vivid and intensive debate, and I was encouraged by the numerous interventions showing the broad engagement by member states and civil society in the efforts to universalize the ATT. So although the increase in membership has slowed down continuously during the past years, as we have seen in presentation by the Secretariat, we shall not scale down our efforts, and the working group on universalization is more vital than ever, providing the platform for exchange and coordination, preparing the grounds for more states becoming a member of the ATT. It was addressed quite rightly that we need political will for this, political will that may be achieved through positive examples, through a network or fabric of contacts from various institutions or organizations, and through the active promotion of the treaty by us, the member states, the states party of the ATT. We have seen the positive examples with the full membership of the Philippines and the announcement and reaffirmation of the Gambia. Let us continue on this path. Universalization has to be understood as a joint endeavor, as an obligation for all of us. Everyone, every member state can engage with countries in its own reach, be it for geographical or political reasons. And we, the working group on universalization, will discuss also possible ways ahead to even better tailor or focus our efforts in this regard. And we will come back to you in the course of the CSP8 with regard to possible proposals. Allow me at this stage also to come back to the focus of and the efforts of the German presidency in regard with the universalization. So since coming into office, the German presidency has undertaken a range of activities related to treaty universalization, As you recall, we successfully passed the ATT resolution in the first committee and the General Assembly, and we have been engaging with 70 states in a démarche action supported by other states and the European Union beginning of this year. And based on the answers received following the démarches in January, we now are actually working on a follow-up together with the head of the export control branch in Berlin, and we are addressing those states which, in the light of the démarches undertaken, might seriously contemplate an accession to the treaty in the near future. So we had a meeting Monday this week where we invited 7 delegations for a round of discussions in this regard, and I think we had a very good exchange on some of the most pressing questions and addressed possible ways to support the internal processes in the respective countries. So I'm hopeful that given the very positive example of the accession of the Philippines, we will create a momentum to add to the number of states parties and to see further accessions to our treaty in the months and years to come. So with this, I would like to end this short report, and I give now the floor to delegations' views on the work and situation as far as the working group on treaty generalization is concerned. Please, the floor is open. No one online? Okay. I think that's just a proof that we have very intensive and good debates in the working groups, because I have the impression everything has been said already. That's good. So if there's no delegation who wants to take the floor, let me just thank at the end also the co-chair of the working group of universalization, Ambassador Gabri, for his continued support and collaboration in our work. Sorry, it's Paraguay? I think it's the delegation of Paraguay, right?
Paraguay, yes.
Yeah, okay, please, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm sorry, I've been a little late in asking for the floor, but first of all, since it's my first intervention, let me thank you for organizing this conference so that we can attend in person, and we congratulate the Philippines for joining the treaty. Let me talk about the situation concerning trade of the arms trade in Paraguay. Paraguay is an importing country. We do not produce weapons, we do not export weapons. So we rely on Article 9 of the treaty. This is why it is so important for the citizens of Paraguay to be able to rely on ATT. We congratulate regional and sub-regional initiatives to fight all the problems resulting from the illegal arms trade. This has often been translated in national legislation. We have always supported UN conventions, for example, for a small weapons trade and ammunitions. and all regional mechanisms existing in Mercosur. We have a law, we have some legislation on munitions. It is a very modern piece of legislation, compatible with all international conventions. But the problem we have is in controlling its implementation. We need better training for inspectors and officials who carry out inspections in general. This is very important for Paraguay. We have to reinforce the capacity and the knowledge of inspectors in Paraguay. We are now cooperating with several international organizations and other countries, especially to apply the roadmap of the UN Weapons Convention. International cooperation is needed. We have had the chance to enjoy the cooperation of international experts in our country. We have to reinforce those links and the cooperation that is needed on the issue. Finally, on reporting, I recognize that Paraguay is late in reporting. 2 reports are pending. This is because we have an update of the legislation, and we have lost there's been a rotation of staff. But we know how important this is for transparency, and thank you very much for, excuse me for being late in my remarks. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate from Paraguay for this intervention, and I see Brazil. Yes, please, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brazil is glad to take the floor for the first time at this ATT meeting under the auspices of Ambassador Thomas Goebel in preparation to the 8th Conference of States Parties. We commend the German presidency for its work, as well as the chairs of the working groups and sub-working groups, which successfully reconvened during this busy week. Brazil internalized the control of arms trade through federal law, the national policy for the exports and imports of defense products, and by stepping up the combat to illegal trafficking by means of the national system dedicated to tracking controlled products and of interagency integrated centers with the Army, the Navy, and the Air Forces, the Federal Police, and the Brazilian Federal Revenue Office, working collaboratively. Support to third countries is also a Brazilian priority. Our Navy has been an active part in capacity building operations under the UN or in cooperation with other navies, as we did in Lebanon until last year, and in Bahrain and in the Guinea Gulf. According to our federal constitution, control over fabrication and trade of military equipment is attributed to the federal government. The Brazilian Army Command has the administrative police power to authorize, regulate, and fiscalize activities that involve controlled products. It is the Brazilian Army that authorizes exports of controlled products, although there are other agencies involved in the process as well. The same applies to imports of controlled products. In sum, Brazil counts with a mature and regulated system for the domestic acquisition, registration, possession, and sale of firearms and ammunition. We have a consolidated national arms system and a military weapons management system already in place. Of course, being a country with a 8,000 kilometers long coast and a 15,000-kilometer long land border. Brazil was especially interested in the topic of transit and transshipment by sea, suggested by the distinguished delegation of Barbados during the February meetings, which was tackled in the sub-working group on Article 9, and that counted with the competent presentation by Dr. Julia Hernisch. Brazil is also motivated by and interested in taking part of the DF, Diversion Information Exchange Forum, which will take place during the CSP8. We must not forget the ATT is a non-proliferation instrument, not a disarmament treaty. As both a Latin American and a South American country, Brazil is aware of the fact that gun proliferation is an important risk factor for crime and violence. Our region, like the rest of the world, will benefit from the ongoing universalization efforts, and we congratulate the Philippines for completing its accession process. Dear colleagues, irrespective of our status, Brazil is fully dedicated to advancing the objectives and principles of the ATT. We are following very closely the debate within this forum that brings many benefits to our population and to our institutions. I thank you all for this very productive week of meetings, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished delegate from Brazil for her intervention. And is there at this stage any other delegation asking for the floor under this agenda item? This seems not to be the case. So, distinguished delegates, I would then like to proceed to item 5 of our agenda. And under item 5, I now invite the head of the ATT Secretariat to update the meeting on the status of the ATT project funded by the European Union to support ATT implementation. So please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, for giving us the opportunity. I have the pleasure then to update this meeting about the status of the ATT Secretariat project established to support treaty implementation. This project, just to give context to it, it forms part of the ATT Secretariat effort to support treaty implementation at a national level. Through the process of the Secretariat fulfilling its mandate and supporting the ATT process, and given our proximity to the treaty and implementation efforts, the ATT Secretariat is in a unique position to identify areas and gaps where implementation support is needed. And in this context, the Secretariat has identified areas where focused support and resources could enhance treaty implementation. As you will be aware, the Secretariat operates a minimized organizational structure and commands limited resources. As a result of this arrangement, there is a limit to the capacity that the Secretariat has to provide implementation support. Towards the end of last year, or towards the end of 2020, and following consultation internally with relevant ATT subsidiary bodies, we approached the European Union with a proposal or project proposal for financial support. We are pleased that our proposal was considered favorably by the EU and approved in April 2021. This project has 3 activities that it's focused on. Each of these activities or projects have clearly defined activities, deliverables, and expected outcomes. The first activity or the first project that we are pursuing here is that of a capacity building of the ATT national points of contact who are designated under Article 5, subsection 6 of the treaty to facilitate issues of information exchange regarding ATT implementation at a national level. The second project under this effort is about capacity building of local and regional ATT experts, and you call that in summary as expert roster. And the reason behind us proposing and pursuing this activity is because we are conscious of the need for states parties to reduce reliance on international consultants because of the cost associated with that. We want to improve the quality of training and implementation assistance, and we want to ensure that these capacity building is properly tailored to circumstances of different states parties in different regions. And as I indicated, that during COVID, this point was brought to the surface because some of the projects, for instance, of ATT implementation were affected by COVID, partly because some of the international consultants could not travel. So we are trying to ensure that there is indeed, to the extent possible, a reduction in the reliance of international consultants, and we build capacity in the regions where these projects and state parties are located. Project number 3 of this effort looks at establishment of an ATT database to match needs and resources. We call it the database. You'll be reminded that the Secretariat has got a mandate under Article 18.3 of the treaty to facilitate the matching of offers and assistance. And up to this point, we do not have some kind of a formal mechanism for states to seek assistance and for others to provide assistance. And we are planning, therefore, under this activity to ensure that we establish such a mechanism to ensure that those who are in a position to provide assistance, we're able to make that visible. And those who are looking for assistance, we also make those requests visible in a very organized mechanism. And we are, again, as I said, we are happy that the EU, through its council decision, has supported these activities. To implement this project and taking into account the minimized structure of the ATT Secretariat, we're able then to put into place additional staff capacity to help implement this project. We've got 3 members, new members of the Secretariat, who have been specifically employed to work on this project. There's 3 of them. The first one is Elizabeth O'Brien, who serves as a project manager for this project. And there's Sally Shirima, who's a project officer. And we also have Daniel Mueller, who's a dedicated finance officer for this project. And we're happy that we're at this capacity because with our current limited capacity, financed through assessed contributions, we're not going to be able to deliver on this task. However, these members of the Secretariat are funded by the project to ensure that the project is well delivered. I'll take a moment just to reflect even more on these project activities so that we can have a clearer understanding of why we've undertaken them, what is the progress we've made thus far. The deliverables that we are looking at insofar as the national points of contacts are concerned, just to even mention that, I think during the course of this week, there has been a reference to the importance of national points of contact. And we understand, we are very conscious of that important role that the NPCs play. And in terms of this project, what we intend to see as deliverables are, 1, we need to develop a guidance document that sets out the roles and tasks of the national points of contact. And I think oftentimes states designate national points of contact And those people who assume those positions some of the time are not aware of what they are supposed to do, what kind of activities they're supposed to undertake. And through these guidance documents, we want to bring to the fore those tasks and responsibilities so that they are very well aware of what they are supposed to do. And again, the guidance document regarding the roles and responsibilities of national points of contact, it's a matter that was raised by CSP8 some few years back, and we were directed as a secretariat to develop this document. And we are working now on this project simply because we have that directive 1 and 2, because we understand the importance of these national points of contact. And the second deliverable is to have briefings with these national points of contact so that at predetermined times we are able to set up some workshops and have a briefing to them regarding these roles and responsibilities. We are going to set up a dedicated web page on the ATT website that will contain information relevant for national points of contact. And of course, then as an ongoing task, we are going to have an outreach so that from time to time, we are able to reach out to the national points of contact and have live communication with them regarding what kind of assistance they need and how we can help them perform their tasks. We hope and believe that if we are able to deliver on these deliverables, there is an outcome that we are going to realize. And the outcome then is that of increased knowledge of the ATT obligations, and including reporting, I must say. One of the tasks or roles that we would want the national points of contact to either perform or facilitate is that of preparation of reports under the ATT. And through this training and through this briefing, we hope and believe that they will be able to assist their states in actually delivering and meeting the reporting obligations. And 2, the briefings are not only about reporting, but they are about all other aspects of the ATT process. And we hope, therefore, that through these briefings, they will be able to have a better awareness of the ATT process in general. And we're going to be able to disseminate materials that will be of assistance to them. The progress we have made regarding this project, and this is ongoing already. With regard to the document, and in December last year, we conducted a survey with national points of contact. Remember, they are designated, and we've got information submitted to states, to the Secretariat regarding those. We conducted a survey in December asking them about quite a number of questions related to treaty implementation. And we got some results out of that. And coming out of those results was that there is a different level of NPC experience. I think they are different. Their experiences, level of experience is not the same, is varied. And 2, their level of involvement is also not the same. There are challenges that they are facing, and there's some assistance that they require. So this is information that is coming out of a survey because we wanted to get this information from them as opposed to us speculating on what their needs are. We wanted to get these needs directly from them. And the document that we've developed then to assist the national points of contact takes on board the elements arising out of this survey and taking into account the treaty obligations. We have had then briefings to these national points of contact. We invited them at 2 briefings. In February, we had about 10 that we invited to come to Geneva for these briefings, and it was before the start of the working group meetings. And we had a lively engagement with them during that time. And we had another cohort that was here since on Monday, who are part of that another 13 that we have brought here under the project for this purpose. And we are planning to have briefing number 3 and number 4 in the following year. And we are consciously trying to take them through the paces so that they are able to better assist their states to implement the treaty. Insofar as the web page is concerned, we are looking at ways and means of trying to get the best web page we can find, and this is work in progress. Insofar as outreach, and already I've spoken to this point already. With regard to project number 2, or activity number 2, about the expert roster or the development of local and regional experts, what are we doing? Where do we stand at the present moment since the time that the project started? Or maybe I must say, what are the deliverables that we want to have under this? We want to be able to design a workshop to train trainers, to develop a training material for this workshop. We want to have a very orderly and very properly organized training, wherein there's material developed ahead of time, and the material covers all the relevant aspects of the treaty, so that when we say to somebody, we have a badge of being an expert, you are able to speak and speak with confidence in almost all aspects of the treaty. And it's important for us, therefore, to have a very robust material that will be able to bring all these aspects to the fore. And again, we'll recruit our trainees. We'll be selective on that. And I must say, we'll be selective simply because we want to have experts. And we'll be taking people who are already having an improved understanding of the ATT and turning them into experts through this effort. We'll be having 6 workshops that we are planning in different regions of the world. And again, we hope that if we can deliver on all these outputs, the outcome will be an increased number of local and regional trainers. And secondly, we'll have a published list on the ATT website of endorsed trainers or experts that have come through the ATT process. The update thus far on that activity: we are currently working with quite a number of what we call expert contributors in the development of the material and the guide. We want to have a comprehensive guide, and we are working on that at pace. We're in consultation with other agencies who are involved in this same exercise. And the reason that is to ensure that we're able to exchange materials. And where a material has already been developed, we can just adapt it for our circumstances as opposed to reinventing the wheel. Insofar as training the trainers workshops are concerned, we are working at the present moment to have the recruitment method. And if we are to have a professionalized way of doing business, we need to be able to have a clearly defined method. And we are working on that method. We are looking at the locations where we'll have the workshops. There will be 4 in English, there will be 1 in French and 1 in Spanish. But we want to find a best location where we can have these workshops, and that's an update insofar as that is concerned. The project database, if I've spoken about the database and the need there too. The deliverable here would be to design an electronic database that would be embedded on the ATT website, which will therefore be populated and updated as appropriate. And again, we so believe that if we can realize those deliverables, we would have an enhanced information on assistance and requests. And again, we want to ensure that there's an alignment between this work stream of work and the work that we do under the VTF, because all of them is about treaty implementation support. And it's important to have some very clearly defined cross-pollination between these work streams. The establishment of the database in terms of progress, we are working at pace to have this database established. We are looking at options, looking at benchmarking with other processes. And of course, then we'll get into the phase of designing that and launching it at the right time. But the implication of this, and I must say this because I think in 2 years or 3 years' time, I'll come to states parties and to these meetings or the ATT meetings and make a proposal. And the proposal will be about, as you can see here, the EU funding would be used to establish this database. But there is a maintenance of it. That would be an ongoing task. Because once it is established, like any other IT system, it has to be maintained. And it could be that at some point, there will be the cost of the maintenance of this database would actually move into the mainstream budget. It will have to be funded by assessed contributions because it will be a database that is part of the ATT Secretariat and it has to be maintained. We are grateful at the present moment for the capital investment to be supported by the EU, but the maintenance cost of it, which will start to kick in about 2 to 3 years, 3 years from now, would have to be taken care of by states parties. The financials, the total budget for this project is 1.3 million euros, and there are reporting arrangements in place that we have to comply with. We have already met the December initial reporting, and we are required, therefore, to provide an interim report by the 12th of July 2022. In conclusion, Mr. President, I wish to mention that this project forms part of what I will call here the supply side driven intervention. And I say so because this is we are supplying that to states parties, but that complements what I will call the demand side driven programs, like the sponsorship program, like the VTF. And I say they are demand driven because the funding is extended to a state on demand by the state or on request by the state. But this time around, we are supplying that. So there's a supply and demand at play over here. And I think all of it is in the spirit of ensuring that there is a sufficient support given to states. And the work streams of the Secretariat, therefore, are expanding as a consequence of this. We've got a VTF as a work stream, sponsorship program as a work stream. Now we've got this project as another work stream. And all of them in consent. They are aimed at supporting states parties. And I wish, therefore, as a last word, Mr. President, to extend my unqualified appreciation to the EU for supporting this effort. And we hope we will continue to have this collaboration and partnership with the EU moving forward. I thank you so much.
I thank the head of the Secretariat for this update on the project to support ATT implementation. I think, and I would join him in thanking for the support we find here by the project of the European Union. I think it's a very important project which we would have been certainly also with regard to what we discussed in agenda item 3. Difficulties to realize without this support. And with this, I would like invite delegations to comment or even perhaps have questions or whatsoever with regard to the project which was just presented by the Secretariat. So I see Côte d'Ivoire, Monsieur, vous avez la parole.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Dumisani Dladla, for your presentation. I would like to come back to what you have said, and I would like to underscore the fact that Côte d'Ivoire strongly encourages this type of approach and these various projects in terms of the effective implementation of our treaty. This is something that is very important for us and for all of the ATT community. Certain states have encountered difficulties with the implementation of the ATT. We know this, but now there are projects to provide support to them, and these projects are extremely helpful, or will be extremely helpful. A project financed by the European Union. On behalf of my country, I would like to thank very warmly the European Union, because with BAFA and Expertise France, we have benefited from this project, and such projects are most welcome. And it's very important to strengthen these training programs and train the trainers and train the experts. So this is something that is very important. So on behalf of my country, thank you very much. Thank you to the delegate from Côte d'Ivoire.
Are there other requests for the floor by any delegation at this stage? This is not the case. Nothing online. Okay, so this concludes this agenda item on the update of the project in support of the ATT implementation. And with this, distinguished delegates, I would turn my attention already to the last item of our agenda, which is the consideration of the draft agenda for the CSP8 meeting. During the first CSP8 informal preparatory meeting held on 18th February, we presented the draft agenda for the CSP8, which was prepared in accordance with the requirements of Article 17 of the treaty, with Rule 15 of the ATT Rules of Procedure. The draft agenda contained items agreed upon by the conference in previous sessions and is consistent with the agendas of previous conference of states parties. During the deliberations that ensued, some delegates suggested that we consider including into the draft agenda for CSP8 an additional item to review the implementation of priority themes of presidents of previous conferences of state parties. At the closing of this first CSP8 informal preparatory meeting in February, I indicated that I, together with the office holders and the ATT Secretariat, was going to consider carefully all inputs received during that meeting and to the extent possible, take them on board. Following this consideration, we have the following observations to make regarding the suggestion to include an additional item. So, firstly, CSP decisions on proposals based on priority themes, particularly the latest ones, were framed in a manner that allows such decisions to be carried forward by various ATT work streams as well as by state parties. For example, the current work plans of various ATT working groups and sub-working groups bring to bear elements of work arising out of CSP decisions on priority themes. Secondly, the ATT Secretariat normally presents to ATT meetings the status of implementation of previous CSP decisions. This is a good start. This effort will improve over time. In addition, the ATT Secretariat also presents to ATT meetings the status of projects arising from previous priority themes. For example, the recent presentation on progress amongst delegations in achieving gender balance pursuant to the CSP5 decision was deliberately taken up at the last meeting by the German presidency. Finally, in drawing up an agenda for a conference of state parties, the presidency and the ATT Secretariat must ensure that a dedicated process in line with the ATT rules of procedure is established during the intersessional period to facilitate discussions on topics that will gravitate towards a CSP agenda. This is done for the purposes of ensuring that CSP agenda items feed from dedicated processes that deliver proposals or recommendations to a subsequent CSP for consideration and decision. So, having carefully reflected on the observations above, and in the interest of making the forthcoming conference efficient in terms of structured discussions, time management, and decision-making, we are of the view that it is not ideal at this stage for the CSP8 draft agenda to be revised by including an additional item on the review of previous priority themes. So, in the light of these considerations, I would like to urge all delegations to support the current CSP8 draft agenda as presented in February, While this being the case, all delegations are encouraged to take advantage of the general debate during the CSP8 to recall or reflect on previous CSP decisions or previous priority themes which were pursued by various presidencies. So with this, I would like to open the floor for delegations' views on the draft agenda items for CSP8. So please, the floor is open. Any delegation who wants to take the floor? No. Okay, so thank you very much. I see it's control arms, please. Control arms, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Control Arms would like to thank you, the working group chairs and facilitators, as well as the ATT Secretariat for another excellent session this week. As always, the Control Arms Coalition appreciates the opportunity to engage substantively and in person with so many ATT stakeholders from all regions. This year, we are pleased to note that some of the CSP5 recommendations on gender are being reflected in the deliberations and outputs of the sub-working groups and the ATT Secretariat. In February this year, the Working Group on Transparency and Reporting addressed the issue of gender and reporting with a presentation and discussion on how to integrate gender perspectives and to improve data collection with regard to ATT reporting. We also welcome the fact that the ATT Secretariat continues to draw attention to gender balance among delegations attending CSP meetings. We welcome the proposal referenced today to include past thematic commitments within the deliberations of the working groups at the beginning of each CSP. This would create opportunities for all ATT stakeholders to contribute to advancing this important work. At each CSP, working group chairs could then share a summary of their accomplishments in this regard. In summary, Control Arms sees value in the explicit allocation of work relating to themes from previous presidencies. Such clear allocation would provide more visibility to these efforts, which in turn would strengthen links and synergies among the work of all ATT stakeholders. As this session closes, Control Arms would like to express our heartfelt appreciation to Sarah Parker for her dedicated service to all ATT stakeholders in her role within the ATT Secretariat. Sarah's unrivaled expertise, integrity, professionalism, and good humor has made working with her both a pleasure and a privilege. Sarah, we wish you all the very best in your future endeavors. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative Control Arms for this intervention, which always were already concluding remarks. No, but we are still on the agenda item 6, and I wanted to thank you for the support of the draft agenda as presented. So we take it to move forward on this basis. Oh, sorry, I see the sorry, I see the UK delegation. Please, Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I can be very brief because I was simply going to welcome your approach and support the conclusion that you've drawn on the question of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I was too quick, but thank you for the support, and I take it then that we will move forward on the basis of the agenda we circulated in February for the meeting in August. I don't see any delegations with a request for the floor at the moment. Online, neither. So, yeah, so Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we were indeed very productive, finishing our meeting well before schedule. So I take it as another proof that the ATT is working well, and indeed it has been working very well and efficiently. We've heard the reports of ATT subsidiary bodies and views and comments of delegations. In the days and weeks ahead, the vice presidents, the management committee, the chairs and facilitators of ATT subsidiary bodies, the ATT secretariat, and the president will carefully consider the valuable inputs received from this meeting. And we will ensure that the reports prepared for CSP8 will reflect the inputs received during the meetings of this week. Through the channels of the ATT Secretariat, I will continue to communicate important CSP8 informations and messages to all delegations. You all have worked efficiently for a very early weekend. In conclusion, I would like to thank you for attending this preparatory meeting and for your active participation. I look forward to seeing all of you at the CSP8 in end of August. I wish you an early and restful weekend. But before we leave, I would like to turn to the Secretariat for an important announcement, which was already announced, as I understand, by our colleague from Control Arms. But please, Domizani, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, and Excellencies, distinguished delegates. I think this matter, the cat is already out of the bag, but I would the genie is out of the bottle. But I want to take this opportunity just to inform this meeting that my colleague and dear friend, Ms. Sarah Parker, the Senior Policy Officer at the Secretariat, will be serving her last day today. And I'll ask Sarah, whilst I say these few words, to come and join us over here. Well, it is with mixed emotions that I have to say that Sarah Parker will be leaving the Secretariat at the close of business today. And also, if the President closes the meeting early, it means her time concludes even earlier. But she's leaving the Secretariat to pursue other professional opportunities outside the Secretariat. We're happy for Sarah to have that. Sarah joined the ATT Secretariat in 2016. In December, to be very specific, the 1st of December 2016, Sarah joined the ATT Secretariat. During the phase of its establishment, the Secretariat was established in that year, so she was one of the first few members of the Secretariat at that time. And during her entire period with the ATT Secretariat, Sarah has served this organization with distinction and pride. She contributed significantly in all projects as well as activities undertaken by the Secretariat. And she did not need to be reminded of the role of the Secretariat, neither did she misunderstand the expectations placed on this organization. Whilst very astute during our engagement in matters of policy, strategy, and tactics, she had a very unlimited energy and vigor to handle other tasks. And those would include managing the logistics of conference services. And as we know, we're a limited organization, limited numbers. There's quite a number of administrative tasks that we have to carry. And Sarah had always been very eager to execute those tasks, including, I must say, the mundane task of preparing the nameplates that we have over there, as well as we lift boxes back to office and here. So she was quite energetic in undertaking this task. Well, she never missed an opportunity to remind the ATT Secretariat staff that came in 2016, particularly myself and Stefan Ott, my colleague over there. She always reminded us that she was the youngest amongst us. Well, of course, then her position of being the youngest in the organization had recently come under threat as we are trying to recruit other members of the Secretariat. And I do not want to establish a connection between her departure and the threat of her position of being the youngest. It was our pleasure to work with Sarah. We are sad to see Sarah go, but we are glad that she's moving to senior roles. We wish you well in your next assignment. And I had the privilege of being a supervisor for the past 5 years, and that was my honor. I thank you so much. Over to you, Mr. President.
No, thank you. And yeah, let me join you just Ms. Ladler by thanking Sarah for all this dedication and for the work in the last years. And so I was a closer witness just in the last months, and I think I was very impressed by all this excellency and proficiency which you have shown in this regard. So there's just one. So unfortunately, I knew that your term will end with the end of this preparatory meeting, but it was not my intention to shorten it in order to make you leave earlier. But anyway, we have to
oh my goodness.
A small farewell.
Say something about the recruitment.
So yes, so that's a sad moment, but it's also a lucky moment because we know that you will stay in Geneva, and so at least we have the occasion to meet perhaps sometimes and somewhere. So we're looking for that. But yes, please, Sarah, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I don't know if I can say much without being very overwhelmed. What I'm quite impressed by is the flowers get bigger and bigger. I had a second bunch from the president last night. If I stay a bit longer, perhaps I'll have my own flower shop. Thank you, Dumasani, for the very kind words that you expressed. It does mean a lot to me to be leaving the process feeling that I have made a valuable contribution to the ATT. As Dumasani pointed out, when I arrived in December 2016, we very much had a blank page. There was nothing here, and we spent the first few years establishing a process, working out a document numbering system, figuring out how to use a website, setting up the voluntary trust fund, setting up the sponsorship program. And it was a very exciting and exhilarating and exhausting time. I'm glad Dumasani perceives me as having lots of energy. Maybe that's why I'm so tired at the end of this. But it was very creative and very rewarding, but I am ready for a new challenge. And but I will, of course, I will miss the ATT. I always describe it as a trade treaty that was negotiated in a disarmament context with humanitarian objectives, and that makes it very complex and very interesting to work on. I will also miss the ATT community. There are many characters and familiar faces and friends that I have made over the years, and I feel very privileged to have been part of this, and I thank you for that. I will also miss my colleagues. They're a small but very dedicated and very hardworking team of people. They work long hours, they work all hours, and as we say in Australia, there are no slackers among them, so I really am going to miss them a lot. Of course, I also want to thank Dumasani for giving me the opportunity to do this role and to have the faith in me that I could do the role. We're quite different characters and we don't always see eye to eye on everything, but I think that actually has made for a stronger partnership and better outcome. People often ask me what Dumasani is like to work with, and I say, I learn something from him every day, and that is true. I also say other things, but maybe this isn't the forum for that. But I often ask myself, oh, what would Dumasani do here? What would Dumasani say here? And I do believe that I will have his voice in my head, giving me advice and guiding my actions for a long time to come. So as I bid adieu to you all, I wish you well with the forthcoming work and entering the second decade of the Arms Trade Treaty. And I wish you all the best with the work ahead and every success in your endeavours. And I will certainly be watching from afar, especially if it's virtual. I can watch subtly. And I thank you all from the very bottom of my heart for letting me be part of this journey with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So stay with us. No, stay with. I don't know. Perhaps you have very important tasks to fulfill, but because, as I said, it's not over yet. You are still a member of the ATT Secretariat. No. So once again, thank you very much. I think that was really great working with you, and be assured we will invite you for the CSP8 to at least to take part in our in possible social events we will organize. Yes, but it's perhaps a little bit odd, but I will hand back to the head of the ATT series to give you just some information on yes, it's like this. We have to replace Sarah in a certain way, and perhaps just an information where we stand.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's true that we were notified by Sarah notified us about her pending departure about 3 months ago. So we're aware that this moment was going to come. We're trying to delay it, but we couldn't. But part of our preparations for the future is to ensure that the organization continues to function. People will come and go, but organizations will stand. And I think it's important for us to be able to ensure that we keep organizations going, and we have to find a replacement for Sarah. We have been working hard to recruit a replacement for Sarah, and we have reached a very advanced stage. And I do hope that in the next 2 weeks, we'll be able to send out a communication to all stakeholders informing you of a person who will take over the responsibility of Sarah. And we do hope that that person will be up to the task as Sarah was. But you'll hear from us in about 2 weeks from now about a replacement of that person, of Sarah, the name of the person will be disclosed to you. And of course, then when the person starts to work, and I'm very careful here, I'm using a person as opposed to he or she, I'm very careful. And we'll notify you about that person's name at the right time, but we hope to do so in 2 weeks from now. I thank you so much for your audience. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, and I think with this perspective, the meeting really comes to an end then. So I have to thank the whole Secretariat for the excellent preparation of this week, and also the management of this week. Normally we have to excuse ourselves with the interpreters, but I think this time I thank the interpreters for their for their work and the dedication. But for once we will free them even before time. No, thank you very much to all of you. Have a safe trip home, and looking forward meeting all of you in August here at the conference center. And with this, this meeting is adjourned. Good. Yeah. But indeed, as you realize, so what will happen? What will happen when you bet her farewell in the